It's Stargrave the Last Prospector week here at OnTableTop, and we have some amazing prizes up for grabs. We'll be choosing winners from 3 of our communities, 1 from the comments on YouTube, 1 from the comments from OnTableTop.com, and 1 from the Cult of Games members, so you guys get an extra chance to win. Make sure and get your comments in, and we hope you enjoy the week.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Stargrave Week as we take a deep dive into The Last Prospector.
Ooh.
And we are joined by the brains behind the whole operation, Mr. Joe McCullough. It's great to have you back on the channel once again, Joe.
Always good to be here.
Let's just dive straight in to
Alrighty.
what I like to think of as the sort of the core part of The Last Prospector, and that's the narrative campaign. Because we'll talk a bit about the soldiers and powers and the like towards the end, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it takes a little bit of a different slant on sort of previous campaigns in that there is a certain linking between them and also the development of factions as well.
I've now written a lot of wargaming campaigns, and most of them have been narrative in the sense that they're quite linear. You know, you play one scenario and then you play another scenario and you put all those together and it creates one big story. And I try to leave players a lot of room to kind of make that their own. The truth is they are playing the story that I have written, you know, as I've kind of written it. And I really like that approach, but I wanted to try something different with this one. And instead of basing the whole campaign around a linear story, I wanted to see if I could base it, well, really just on something else. And that something else turned out to be kind of a mystery and a place. So the mystery is the disappearance of the prospector who you're looking for. And the place is one specific system of space. And it's kind of a off in the corner, forgotten little corner of space where you've got, it's basically a former big mining system. But of course, since the universe galaxy has fallen apart, it's been mostly abandoned. And you've still got little factions there kind of fighting over the scraps. So yeah, so there's 10 scenarios in the book, but the only ones you play at specific times are the first one, which you play first, and the last one, which you play last. But all the others, players are given kind of the option. So basically the person who wins the first scenario gets to choose what scenario you play second. And on and on and on until you get to that final scenario. And of course, that's a perfectly fine system, but I also needed a reason why it wouldn't matter what you chose instead of just, you know, giving you the fun choice. There's actual reason. And that reason is within the system, there are kind of 6 factions that are all kind of vying for power, mostly based on kind of their physical location. So there's the one faction that's on the one actual planet in the system. There's one on the big space station. There's 3 that inhabit the asteroid fields. And then there's one that sits on a giant derelict spaceship. And basically, as you go through the scenarios, the things you do in those scenarios kind of influence how those different factions feel about you. So obviously, if you play a scenario where you kill a bunch of guys from one faction, they're not going to like you so much. But if you do something that helps them by, you know, kicking around one of their enemies or, you know, uncovering something that they want to know about, then your faction standing will go up. That standing you have with those factions is relevant both between games in that you can get bonuses to different things depending on which factions you're in good with, but also during specific scenarios. So if you're doing a scenario that's based in a specific asteroid, you'll probably get a bonus if you're friendly with the group that basically claims that asteroid as its territory. So there's a little more kind of to track between games in this campaign than there are in most, because you have to keep track of your standing with each group and, of course, which scenarios you've played. So yeah, so it's a very different kind of narrative structure. It gives players a little more freedom to kind of push what they want to do. And because I really wanted to emphasize, I mean, part of the fun of the setting is that you're these kind of free operatives and you can go anywhere. But of course, you can't in the war game sense of we have to go here because this is the game we're playing tonight. I think this brings a little more feel of, all right, now we're going to go check out, that asteroid over there. We're going to go, we've heard a rumor that there's something going on down in the jungle planet, so we're going to go check that out. So yeah, but creating a narrative in a different way.
It gives a certain amount of agency to the players as well, and left me thinking when we were playing through our little mini version of the campaign about how similar it was to some things like PC RPGs. So like Star Wars Knights of the Republic, you're probably you will end up visiting all the planets or all the areas. The order in which you do it is up to you, and because of that, what will happen on them and the standing you gain or lose may have effects on other things down the line, which could be detrimental to you. Because those faction standings are always in flux, and it's not just positive; they can go quite negative as well. I discovered in that bar fight at the start, which, by the way, is terrible. And I wasn't aiming to kill civilians, but an awful lot of them got in the way of my grenade blast. An awful lot of them.
If you will throw grenades in a crowded bar.
But things like that were just so much fun to play out, to get involved with, and also to see, because you're thinking, well, if I take the safe and easy route, it's going to make it much more likely my opponent's going to win, because then they're not having to worry about what the PA or PA or however it's pronounced, what they think of them. But in your initial game, you're not really thinking about the factions either. I know I certainly wasn't, and Shay, my opponent, wasn't. We were just going, well, we've got to get in here and get that, you say. Oh, in that case, clear the room, civilians. We've got fighting to do. But then, as you get into the next game, you're going, oh, right, well, all of a sudden, they don't like us so much.
Such a great idea.
And then our little journey, which people can go back and have a look at now anyway, because they're all out. It ended up with, spoilers. It ended up, we finished off a little three story triptych. Our little narrative finished with the revolutionary.
Okay.
At which point it all swung back around again, because Pa really didn't like me. But that's fine, because the revolutionaries were much more on board, and that helped me out a bit as well. So you're constantly getting this, and that's just from the story side, where you get these little ups and downs, but then the bonuses are a whole aside, and I find that really enjoyable to work my way through, because, like you say, there's a bit of bookkeeping, but it's not egregious. You're mapping out whether you're going up and down with 6 factions, and then you've got your investigation score as well. So, you're not really having to document hundreds and hundreds of pages of stats and stuff. You can just sort of get into it, and then by the time we'd got through those games, you're thinking, right, well, this little corner of the galaxy is starting to take shape, and I can see certainly how my crew are viewed by the various people in this, which is mostly with indifference, with the exception of Pa. But Shay's crew, who are brutal deluxe, really got tight with Molly. So
we're the gangsters of the system, basically.
Oh, very, like attracts like, apparently, in this case. But yeah, I just found that a beautiful sort of change to the narrative structure of the campaign. The fact that you have influence with these people around you, and the influence can stand you in good stead or not, as you play through. So is this something that you're probably going to introduce into more games and campaigns going forward? I know you often change things up, but I think this one is really nice.
It was all kind of an experiment. So, I wasn't 100% sure how it was going to come out, but it seems to work. And I'd like to kind of work with the structure a bit more. Another thing it did, which I really liked, was it helped explain something to me. Well, one of the issues to me as someone who writes campaigns is I have this underlying kind of worry about, like, why do the warbands or crews or whatever always end up in the same place at the same time to fight over the same thing? And it's not very believable most of the time, but most players don't really care because they're there to have a good time. But as a narrative writer, it kind of irks me sometimes. But I think in this, it really worked because you actually feel like you're chasing each other around. Oh, they're going there. They must know something. We're going after them. So it worked in that sense for me. too, because as you mentioned, there's also an investigation score, which is basically as you play the games, along with kind of money and stuff, you receive points essentially as you're trying to find clues as to what the prospector was doing and where he's gone, and basically you build up this what is a in-campaign treasure chest that for the giant climactic scenario you get to spend on extra stuff. So it also has that element of kind of mystery to it, and you're investigating as opposed to just wandering around blasting everything.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular favorite scenario from the ones that you wrote that you were like, I can't wait to play this one?
I quite like there's one called what is it, the Devil's Fruit Bowl. The idea came for that when I was cycling through Oxfordshire one time, and there's an area called the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is just a big hole, really. But I thought it'd be really fun to kind of set a scenario in that, because I wanted to see if I could translate the kind of dimension of a bowl onto a flat table, and come up with rules for that. So during that scenario, you kind of have a chance of tripping and falling and rolling down towards the middle. So it kind of forces everybody to come together. And I also like there's an element of really annoying plants in that scenario that you get to place around, and they spit at you and stuff. So that one quite amuses me. I had a lot of fun with the scenarios because you've got this whole system. It really got me thinking about making them distinct. So you've got that one, which is almost like a Ghost Archipelago scenario in many ways, and then you've got the bar fight, which I've never actually done a bar fight before, and kind of what rules can I bring into that to make it interesting? So in that one, you're a little more limited because they don't let people in with power armor walking into the bar and stuff like that. But yeah, so there's a lot of variety. And there's another one. It's almost like a Magnificent Seven scenario where you're in this town and it gets attacked by the gangsters, and the gangsters are riding jet bikes around, so coming up with fun rules for people attacking on jet bikes. And a lot of that goes back to one of my other central themes, which was kind of trying to make it a Western in space. It's quite a common trope to take science fiction and add that Western. We've seen it a lot with Firefly, and recently with Mandalorian and Boba Fett. And I thought it works well because you've got this what is essentially a lawless system, but it's all kind of run down and quite frontier. So everybody's having to really do whatever to survive. So I wanted to bring in, so you get the fight in the saloon, and you get the fight against the mounted bad guys. And, there's a lot in mines where you got miners doing stuff. And so there's one in the mine I really like that's got a giant mining machine that essentially goes nuts and just wanders around the board chewing everything up. So, but of course, what you want is on that thing. So you got to try to jump on it and ride that sucker.
Well, it's as close to a train robbery as you can get, I suppose, in an asteroid mining belt in the middle of nowhere. Floating through space. Yeah, it's a fascinating set of scenarios that put together. And like you say, because you've got that system, and you have here's your planet, here's your station, here's your decrepit ship, and here's the asteroid belts with various people on them, you can play out using a whole host of board setups and not have it feel like you are restricted, like your campaign is on this planet and every game will feel the same. Here you're jumping around and really using the fact that Stargrave is set in space and set with crews and the ships to navigate the system and explore the sort of the outlying corners of it, and then get ping pong balled around the asteroid belt on things like the last base, where there's like 0G and you're just constantly bouncing off rocks to get into new directions, which is just fascinating and I love to bits. So I suppose moving away from the narrative and scenario side, there are new soldiers and there are new backgrounds as well. This time round, we have 2 new backgrounds and a few powers to go with. Do you want to give us a sort of a brief introduction to this?
One thing I want to say is, so when I did Frostgrave, I've always tried to avoid putting kind of what I consider to be core material in supplements, because I want people to be able to buy the Frostgrave book and just feel like I've got all I need to play, I'm good. When I created Stargrave, I decided to give myself a little more leeway and say, you know what, if I think there's something fun enough, I'm going to put it in a supplement. And obviously, you don't need it because you can still play Stargrave fine without it. But if you encounter someone who's got one of these backgrounds, you may not immediately know what they can do.
Sure.
But I mean, we're only talking a few minutes worth of explanation. So yeah. So the first one is the investigator, which seemed highly appropriate. It is
for an investigation-based sort of campaign.
For an investigation-based game. It's also like it's a trope that I think really belongs in the universe because we're talking about a universe that's essentially fallen apart. It used to be completely interconnected, and now you have no idea what's going on in the system next to you. So not only are these guys private investigators in the classic sense, you can hire them to find someone or find something, they're also the way that you just find out what's going on in other parts of space. So they're almost like newsmen as well. And what that really amounts to is they become information brokers. And so some of their powers have to do with information, since information is a commodity in the game. Some of their powers let them do things with that and kind of make more money off it than would be possible otherwise. And also because they're kind of, you think of investigators, you think of the trench coat and their pistol and stuff. And I know a lot of players kind of wanted cooler pistol stuff in the game. So they've got kind of a pistol-based power or two that kind of increases that and makes it more playable. In a system that generally the rifle is better, but if you focus on the pistol, you can do that.
I quite liked it because it has a sort of a mix between a Blade Runner type investigator, but also there's sort of film noirish hints, the sort of the Sam Spade, because you've got things like bait and switch in there and stuff like that, and all I could think of was things like the Maltese Falcon, where people think that they've got one up on your investigator and are running off with the loot, and really they're just running off with a bag of sand. And meanwhile, your investigator's heading for the hills with the actual data loot that people were there for. And you've got a nice blend where you can go sort of for that sort of solo-esque rogue, I suppose, as well. That it's an interesting one that I like to see. I also like the fact that you can just get up close and personal, because generally when you're playing Stargrave, there's quite a lot of terrain on the board. So long ranges don't really matter. If if you can see somebody, you can shoot them. And so having that pistol is good as well.
And the other one's the Fate Winder, which so you've got the kind of investigator is your quite hard noir, man on the ground. The Fate Winder is almost the opposite of that and is a much more wizardy type. So you've got mystics in the game already who can do some of that, but they're more kind of Jedi. These guys are much more your kind of seers, or basically their shtick is that they can look into probable futures and determine what the likely outcome of certain things are. So they can't, it's not that they see the future and that this will happen. They see the future, and if this action is undertaken, these are the probabilities of it happening. And so their powers tend to do things about manipulating probability, and it's a much more game thing, I guess. They manipulate dice rolls and things like that. So
I suppose it's one of these where they have a lot of powers that can sit and will potentially be unused. But the fact that you've activated something like, I think it's Saving Grace, where you can move out of range of blast templates, which may mean that your opponent then won't bother attempting to psionic fire you or throw a grenade at you, because he knows that token's on, and so they're unusual in so much as they're almost like mitigation. You can stack a lot of stuff onto a Fate Weaver or people around them that will then just discourage your opponent from taking actions against them, which I suppose is makes a lot of sense for the Fate Winders. They're going, well, I knew you were going to do that, which is why you're not going to do it now, but I knew you weren't going to do that either.
Exactly.
Touche.
So I hope and think it brings a little different aspect to the gameplay, and they're a great kind of background to pair with another background. So if you've got a soldier as your captain, you having a Fate Winder as your first mate could really produce some nice synergy.
Mm.
Real strategies for how you play the game.
And apart from the backgrounds for your captains and first mates, there's also a few new soldiers that can be recruited, and these ones have a much more melee feel behind them. Not all of them, but certainly two of them. Like to get up close and personal.
Sounds good for bar fights, yeah.
I wish I'd brought them to the bar fight.
And those are an example of basically player feedback. When I originally wrote Stargrave, I didn't include a lot of melee because I thought, it's a game about guns.
Yeah.
And who's the idiot bringing a knife to a gunfight? But of course, these games aren't based on reality. They're based on cool movies and comic books and stuff. And there's always melee mixed in with the guns where there probably shouldn't be. So that's fine. So I admit that I got that one wrong. And so I went back and thought about it and came up with a couple of soldiers you can take, that are wanting to get up close and personal. And so they have some special rules that hopefully means they live long enough to get close enough and then do better when they get there. I hope it gives people what they wanted, but it is still a risky undertaking in a system that's pretty unforgiving.
You've still got to run through the open with your laser dagger to hit the guy. That's the
still have to roll your d20 when you get there. So
that's why you've got your terrain expert finding all the cover as they run forward. And then they get savaged to death by a dog. A dog.
Well, that's why you got your Fate Winder there.
Well, yeah.
Not the dog!
One of the things I wanted to ask you, because obviously, you've got the developers of these new backgrounds and the soldiers and the story as a whole. Have you found moving into sci-fi has been a more interesting creative sandbox to play in than fantasy? Or are you or have you all more or less seen the two genres being very similar in the kind of depth that you can dive into?
I actually found it quite intimidating when I first did it,
right?
Because it doesn't have the same, at least geographic limits that say Frostgrave does, or games based on the ground. Since then, though, I think with supplements, it actually does really help because it's just like, man, I can really go anywhere and do anything. And something like this, I don't think I could set up a campaign like this in Frostgrave without really heavily defining the background of the city, which I've always tried to avoid doing.
Sure.
But here, since it's basically just like, here's one system. If you go there, this is what it's all like.
That's what's happening.
But, since there's thousands of systems, I haven't really defined the galaxy to any, point that's going to cause anybody any trouble. So in that sense, I've really enjoyed the kind of opening up. It both comes with some, real nice opportunity, but also a little bit of like, oh gosh, if I can go anywhere, where do I go? So
an embarrassment of riches ahead of you.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of ahead, what's next for Stargrave then? Where do you go after The Last Prospector?
So I've already finished writing the next one. It's in production, which is called Hope Eternal. The title is a bit of a play on Star Wars and A New Hope and that kind of idea, but also just that Stargrave so far is quite a grim universe if you look at it too carefully. Not that most people do, but where these big pirate fleets are just mushing everybody that gets too uppity. So I wanted to do two things. One, which was write a campaign where the players really do get to be heroes in this universe and basically take on these pirate fleets. And I wanted to write a solo campaign or cooperative, if because mechanically they're very similar. So it's the book is basically a big solo or cooperative campaign where you basically start off, you're just hired to get some data, and the next thing you know, you're involved in this huge fight to actually wipe out a pair of pirate fleets. And so it's got a nice kind of escalation to it, and it also has an actual train scenario where you're actually trying to rescue someone from a train, because because who doesn't like trains,
Yeah, everybody loves. Well, apparently Fox TV don't like trains.
Well,
Well, apart from them, everybody else loves
Yeah.
trains, especially in space. I mean, at that point, rescuing or finding the last prospector seems so much easier when you're just having to deal with 6 factions in a small system, as opposed to taking out 2 massive fleets. Tricky,
yes.
very tricky, I imagine. But it should be
So, yeah.
fascinating to see how that goes.
Yeah, so that one's got you obviously a much more linear narrative, but again, I guess kind of going back to Ben's question about scenarios with both of these books, I think the scenarios are much more different from each other than they tend to be in Frostgrave, because Frostgrave, it tends to be you go from this part of the road to that part of the road to that part of the road. Here you're going from the jungle planet to the remote asteroid to the space station, and in this new one you're going from attacking a town or trying to get something in a town to robbing a train to you're underwater in the new one for one of the scenarios. So
there's always a bigger fish.
Exactly. Crab in this case, but yeah.
I like crabs. Well, that seems fascinating to leave it there so people can sort of wet their whistle. It has been an absolute pleasure once again, Joe. And
Always fun.
I've really enjoyed playing through the smalls. I mean, I think we just teased a quarter of the scenarios, and that's all in our little playthrough this week. So if people are interested, they should definitely check out Stargrave. Obviously, with things like Quarantine 37 as well, there's already solo rules out there for it. So if you want to play some solo or cooperative games, you can give those a go as well and explore the galaxy with your crew and get your ship set up and your captain on his way to riches and fame. If you've any questions, pop them below. We'll pass them across to Joe. But until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.